Welcome back everybody to another episode of our weekly Moto News Roundup, where this week we'll be looking at the sad news around British brand CCM, the big changes happening at KTM, their first new bike announced this year, Enfield's crafty move to avoid tariffs, Honda's new electric bikes and annual custom build competition, a couple of new machines from KOVES, a gold edition of Moto Morini's adventure bike, and some interesting news on the upcoming BMW F450 GS, which could have a bit of a knock-on effect on potentially a new Norton. But let's kick off with that terrible news this week that British brand CCM have gone into administration. Now, there's not a great deal of detail available right now, but they did put a post on their owners group on Facebook, which said, "Sad news for British motorcycling, CCM Motorcycles has been placed into administration by Battalion Group, a legendary name in UK bike manufacturing known for their handcrafted machines and bold innovation, now facing uncertain times. Thoughts go out to the workers, engineers and fans of the brand. Let's hope this isn't the end of the road for CCM." I'd wholeheartedly second that sentiment, but for reference in the meantime, Battalion Group is their parent company who got involved a few years back, and they had grand plans to grow the brand and sell more bikes. So I guess what happened? Well, I think one of the big challenges for CCM is that all their brilliant looking, fancy looking bikes like the Spitfire and the Street Moto R that we reviewed recently, well, they're daring to look at, and the build is very clean and stripped back and almost custom looking, but as a result, they're not actually homologated, and so they have to go through single vehicle approval before they can be sold in the UK, which is the same thing you'd use if you were building your own amateur custom build. Now, I'd assume that limited their ability to grow because it probably made it quite difficult to sell their bikes overseas, and you'd have to think that the work required to get the bike homologated, because it was so bare bones without ABS and it had a really free-flowing exhaust system, it would have been substantial. To be fair though, the other thing is that the economy just hasn't been that strong, and it has hit the motorcycle industry particularly hard, and specifically for them, well, their biggest dealers, Completely Motorbikes, did shut down a few months back, and so not only did that mean that there were fewer places to actually go and buy a CCM, but also they ended up buying back quite a lot of the stock. Now, more recently, CCM had directly been offering their first ever 0% finance deal to try and drum up some sustainable levels of business, but unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it was enough, and I really do hope that someone does pick the brand up and get it back on its feet, because not only would it save a bunch of jobs, of course, but also the bikes are so unusual and the motorcycle market would be a much less interesting place without them. Perhaps you could find some hope there in the fact that KTM seem to have at least one foot on the road to recovery after Bajaj recently stepped in with hundreds of millions of euro to help them pay that 30% of their debts that they agreed with the administrator. Now, more details of this deal have started to emerge over the past week or so, and it seems as though that initial loan that they've made, pending regulatory approval, could, in short, result in Bajaj taking a majority stake, which would leave them in control of everything, including all the sub-brands like Husqvarna and GasGas and WP Suspension. Now, Bajaj have been involved with KTM for years, not only as a stakeholder, but also as a manufacturing partner, but it really does look like they're starting to take control. For example, with a bit of a reshuffle on the board, with 3 of the key members set to step down as of the AGM in June, and one of the nominations to replace them is Bajaj's own chief financial officer. So yeah, it looks like they'll be pulling the strings at KTM very soon, and that could have some really interesting consequences. I mean, Bajaj make all of the 390 bikes and below out in India, so will they double down on that and make more of a success of it? Or will they keep all of the more premium offerings like the 1390s and the 990s? If they do, will they still keep that Austria factory open, or will they move production elsewhere? And also, what happens to the relationship with CF Moto, a competitor potentially of Bajaj, who at the moment make the 790 bikes for KTM? Lots of stuff still up in the air, and I'm sure more will become clear over the next few months. But in the meantime, some more modest changes have already started to appear, like, for example, the KTM MotoGP bikes at Silverstone last week, having the Bajaj logo for the first time ever on the front of their fairing there. Then I saw this Facebook post which appears to show the Pira Mobility logos being taken down from their US office and replaced with just KTM. Now I can't verify it firsthand, but those pictures do match other pictures of the Pira offices, and as someone who photoshops a lot of stuff for work, for thumbnails and stuff like that, these pictures do look legit. So I'd love to know what you think. Are Bajaj the right company to get KTM back on track? Or does too much of their expertise lie with the small capacity stuff and not enough of the high performance bikes? Let me know what you think in the comments. Certainly in the short term though, KTM do seem, committed to selling the premium bikes, perhaps more so than ever, with their first new bike announcement since the whole financial saga. This is the 450 Rally Replica, which they say is the closest thing you can buy to a genuine Dakar race bike. It looks, to me, pretty incredible. You've got super premium components, full adjustability, big fuel tanks and a rear pod, a digital road book, and so basically everything you could ever need to go really very fast across the desert. The price though, mamma mia, £36,299 according to one UK dealer website that I found, and there'll be just 150 of them made worldwide. Still, 150 bikes at that price would be £5.5 million in revenue, which I'm sure would be more than welcome at KTM right now. In fact, researching that price on that dealer website, you could click straight through to a quote for Santander Finance to see what the monthlies would be on a PCP. 755 quid a month for a dirt bike, effectively, which is just absolute madness. Meanwhile, Cycle World report this week on near future plans for Italian super premium brand MV Agusta. Now, if you cast your mind back a few months, you'll remember that last year KTM bought a majority stake in MV, only for them to have to sell it back to the Sadarov family when they did hit those financial difficulties. But MV's MD, Luca Martin, says that the transition back out of KTM is going very smoothly, with no disruptions expected, and the general vibe is that MV, he thinks, are on the up. Which, would say that, I guess. Now, they will still share some IT and background stuff with KTM until the end of the year, apparently, but things like dealers haven't been affected because they always kept them separate, and they're even hoping to grow their dealer network by opening a few new locations this year. Parts and spares are still distributed through KTM at the moment, but they are working on an agreement with a third party that they're hoping will kick in as well before the end of this year. Perhaps most exciting though is the fact that they've got new bikes in the work, which they say will be announced before EICMA in Milan this November, with one of them being a new bike that only has 1% carryover from the previous generation that it replaces. So that should be something quite interesting. And then they also say there'll be an engine prototype unveiled, which, in their words, aims to redefine the concept of hyper performance. I mean, the Brutale 1000s already make well over 200 horsepower, so I'm very interested to see what this might be. But Cycle World reckon in their article that it could be a new F4. A beautiful sports bike that unfortunately was dropped back in 2018, I believe, because of Euro 5. And so yeah, I'd very much join them in being excited if that one did re-emerge. It looks like plenty to get excited about though this year for MV. Now, before we get onto Royal Enfield, just a quick reminder that our competition that we're running in partnership with LIKELOK is still open, so do get your entries in because you've got about a week or so. LIKELOK make incredible D-locks to keep your bike safe when you're out and about, with a special coating called Baronium that means they take up to 20 times longer to cut through than a regular unprotected lock. Very smart stuff, and we're giving away one of their X3s, which is their flagship motorcycle lock. They're worth about 250 quid, so that's a very good prize indeed. But on top of that, 3 runners-up will get a £100 voucher for their site, and there's also a discount code running for anyone who just wants to get on with it and buy one. So do have a look down in the description for both the entry form and the discount code, and I should point out it's very quick to enter and also open globally, so any of you watching can get involved. Now, with 25% tariffs recently announced in the US for imported motorcycles, well, it looks like Royal Enfield have tried to get ahead of things by importing a shed load of bikes before the deadline, which was March 26th. According to Rider Part, Royal Enfield imported almost 9,000 bikes, which I think is about 1.5 times what they would normally sell in a year. So I guess that means what they can do is offer all those bikes at a regular price for the foreseeable future until, I suppose, they sell out. Not every motorcycle brand has pockets deep enough to do that, so it's a massive competitive advantage. Other brands are going to have to either change their pricing or build a US factory or potentially just pull out altogether. And so maybe expect to see a few more Enfields on the streets of America in the next few months. Over at Honda though, well, they're focusing on electrics with a goal to launch 30 electric bikes and scooters before 2030. And just this week, their first ever production electric motorcycle hit the market. It's called the EVO, and while it's for China only at the moment, well, it might be a bit of a sneak peek of what's to come for the rest of the world. Now, despite the somewhat sporty, modern cafe racer inspired looks, it is certainly not going to rip your arms off with about 20 horsepower peak, and the 765mm seat height says city bike more than it does super naked, but you will get 75 miles on a charge from the standard bike, which should be enough for the urban commute, and that goes up to just over 100 miles if you opt for the slightly more premium triple battery version. A fast charge from 20 to 80% they're saying will take about an hour, which seems decent, but I think the most impressive thing about it is this dazzling array of tech. You've got a TFT dash, of course, 3 riding modes, traction control, ABS, hill hold control, a slow walking forward and backward mode, dash cams front and rear, LED lighting, tire pressure monitoring, connectivity, USB charging, cruise control, and even the ability to pair with a camera from our partners at DJI. And yet, it costs 30,000 yen, which if you just did a direct currency conversion is about £3,000. And so while of course it wouldn't be that simple if it was offered in the UK, there'd be taxes and different pricing strategies, it'd be way more expensive. But look, it does look like all that fancy stuff that used to be just available on the most premium expensive bikes really is now trickling down to the more affordable stuff, and perhaps on the new electric bikes that's going to be even more so the case. If you like your bikes properly old school though, like a long stroke 350cc air-cooled single, then look no further than their handsome GB350S, which they launched for this year, and it's also been announced that it's the next candidate for their annual custom build-off. They've done it in the past for the CL500 Scrambler, the CB1000s, the Rebels, the Monkey bikes, and the finished bikes each year are always shown at Wheels and Waves, which is a custom bike and surfing festival down in Biarritz, which I really must go to, but I just haven't had the chance yet. For this year, they've given a bit of a preview with 5 of the candidates so far, and I've got to say the 350 really does lend itself to being customized, and so I'm looking forward to seeing the full lineup in a week or two. And also I'll point out that once they're launched, you'll be able to vote for your favorite at hondacustoms.com, so keep your eyes peeled for that, and we'll follow up when we got more pics of the finished builds. Now onto a few new adventure bikes that could be in the works, and perhaps the most interesting of the bunch looks to be this new 800X Rally from the Chinese brand KOVES. Or is it KOVES? I say KOVES. You see, they launched the 800X non-rally version last year at ABR Festival, at least here in the UK, and it does look really quite good. A proper off-roady spec, lighter than most of the competition, and also a decent 95 horsepower from a parallel twin that's based upon the KTM 790 design. All for the, fairly modest sum of about 8.5 grand. And so yeah, a proper competitor for bikes like the Tenere 700. This new rally version though, if you like your off-roading, well, it really does seem to take things up a notch. With a chunkier fork, more travel on the fork as well by about 30mm, tubed tyres, proper off-road rally-style wheels, and then they've also got rid of anything unnecessary like the passenger pegs. They've got a single off-road front disc instead of the twin disc of the regular version, and it's helped them to cut the weight right down to just 179 kilograms, which is really very impressive for an 800 adventure bike. Potentially as well, I was expecting this one to be a bit more spendy than the regular 800X, but from a dealer website that I've seen with a bit of a pre-order setup, well, it looks like it's going to be just a couple of £100 more than the standard 800X. So if you're looking for some cheap adventuring, this does look like it could be a good candidate. And I believe this one will also be on show at ABR Festival, but this year. So definitely check it out if you're heading down. And also, we'll be there. I might try and grab a video with it. And do say hello if you see myself and Tim knocking about filming stuff. Now, on top of that, Cycle World also report that they're working on a bike called the 625X, which will be a smaller capacity, more affordable alternative, I guess, to the 800s. Although perhaps a bit confusingly, it uses the same engine as the very similarly named DS625X from another Chinese manufacturer, Bajaj. But I guess apart from the engine, this one will probably have more so its own chassis, its own tech package, and its own bodywork and styling. So potentially another good option in that mid to small capacity, aggressively priced adventure bike part of the market, with the Bajaj selling at $5,999. So I'd expect this to be pretty similar. Moto Morini, though, would probably also throw their names in the hat with their X-Cape 700, and it was a couple of years back that I actually tested out the 650 version, and for $7,000 I was pretty impressed with a nice handling bike, really nicely finished, if a little bit heavy, and maybe I didn't love the character of the 180 crank, but for the money, you couldn't really complain. The start of this year then saw the update to the 700 version, which I haven't had chance to try out yet. But also this week they've announced an extra fancy new gold edition of it, which gets a nice selection of extra specs. So not only do you get the gold anodized rims, which I guess might have given it the Gold Edition name, but also there's heated grips and a heated seat, switchable traction control, which I don't believe is the case on the standard bike, plus a center stand and a forward-facing dash cam. So a bit of a step up in spec, although it does still seem like decent value at €7,940. That's compared to the $7,190 of the standard bike. The only downside is it looks like this one is for Italy only for now, with no word on whether it'll become available for the rest of the world. Still, I would say no adventure bike is more anticipated this year than the Baby GS from BMW, and this week it's been confirmed that it'll be manufactured by Indian brand TVS. Perhaps no big surprise because they made the 310 models, which this F450 GS effectively replaces. But what might be a surprise is that not only will TVS go on to make their own bikes on this new 450 parallel twin like the Apache sports bike, but also a new small to mid capacity Norton, which has been rumored to be in the works for some time now. You see, some of you will already know that TVS bought Norton a couple of years back after that whole terrible pension scandal. And so while a smaller, more affordable Norton, predominantly for the Indian market, has, been on the cards for some time now and does make complete sense, well, this is the first time that we've had any official comment on it or proper details. I think what's most interesting about this engine is that most parallel twins get a 270-degree crank or a 180-degree crank, but this one's said to use 125 degrees, which I think I'm right in saying has never been used before and is completely unique on the motorcycle market. That should give it a distinctive sound and feel and character, and so I'm really looking forward to what they come up with, be that with BMW or TVS, but maybe now I'm most looking forward to the new Baby Norton. As always, I'd love to know what you think of this week's stories, so do let me know down in the comments below, and I'll also stick a playlist on the screen now of all of our other videos that we've produced this week in case you've missed them. We had a complete guide to Kalimoto's excellent motorcycle navigation app, a first ride on the new 2025 Triumph Trident 660, and perhaps the one I'm most proud of, a comparison of the new Speed Triple and S1000R, which I shot last week with Tim, and that one's definitely worth a watch. Do hit subscribe as well for more of the latest motorcycle news and reviews right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you next time.